Okay. Good evening, everyone, and just starting our School District 68 Board of Education Business Committee meeting at 6:01 p.m. This day of Wednesday, November 18th. So I'm calling the meeting to order, and with great respect and humility, acknowledge and honor the lands of the Nanaimo people. The Nanaimo people maintain their profound, unique, and spiritual connection to the land through ageless traditions, teachings, stewardship, and expressions of reciprocity. Myself, I'm chiming in this evening from my dry house in the Nawas territory. And I'd also, before we start to get into the meeting, like to also acknowledge tonight that this is our first public meeting since some recent announcements in our district of a number of exposures. And I want to acknowledge specifically the hard work of all the staff, all the involved district staff who dealt with the communications and all the planning related to those incidents. I also want to acknowledge the folks in our community and everyone that sits around this table and how they may be feeling, and the patience that families and students have shown throughout this process. And lastly, to acknowledge where folks may be at with their own health and wellness right now, and specifically those who may be affected by this, wishing them health and well-being in this time. So with that, I'm going to open up the four points on the agenda and ask, is there any additions, deletions, or changes in order to the agenda? And I just have to make sure I'm in the right segment here, yeah. Okay, so anyone opposed to approving the agenda as is? I'll ask that you indicate in the chat box. Okay, seeing no opposition, I'll move on to item number 6 of the agenda, approval of the minutes. The minutes are in the package dated October 14th. I see that Trustee Chair McKay moved the minutes. Do I see a seconder? Trustee Keller seconds. Any opposition to approval of the minutes? Okay, seeing none, the minutes are approved. Going on to agenda item 7, presentations. We have no presentations this evening. We have senior staff reports under item 8. 8.1, Executive Director of HR, Patricia Trick, and Manager of Occupational Health and Safety. This is always a tongue twister for me. Occupational Safety and Wellness, Will Dirksen. And I'll turn this over to Patricia Trick to talk about the impacts of COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Two things. First of all, thank you for the opportunity tonight to speak, for Will and I to speak about, and very high level, about some of the indicators and strategies of our employees and our staff well-being that we are going through right now, particularly in the times of a pandemic response. I'm going to speak for a little bit and then I'll turn it over to Will Dirksen. And I just want to also say, I hadn't planned this, but I really appreciated Trustee O'Neill, your thank you to an acknowledgement of the staff and community, because really I think that's what it's all about. So I'm just going to start off with just a few of the indicators that we are watching and how we kind of, can keep do the temperature checks on a regular basis. So first of all, it is interesting, and we've been watching this since September, and today Assistant Secretary Treasurer Maureen Hambley, she's really good at watching this daily, and she let me know again today that our absentee rates are relatively the same as last year at the same time. And in fact, some days they're even lower. So we're really pleased to see that that is a very strong indicator for us, and that has continued to be steady to date. The second indicator, and this is kind of interesting, is we were able to look at the last 2 quarters of our employee and family assistance report. And I can just talk again very high level about a couple of things, but there has been an interesting trend in our district that also was a global trend. And so back in April, the quarter, April, May, and June, the access to services from the Employee and Family Assistance Program in areas that would be kind of relevant, like areas like stress or anxiety. Interestingly enough, the access to their counseling services decreased by 30% in that period, and of course that was largely a period where we were, into a hybrid kind of a learning model, or, working from home in many cases. So that remained pretty constant at a decline of 30% right through till July. And then in the next quarter, in August, September, and October, July, August, and September, interestingly enough, in August and September, the access rates in those categories resumed by 30%. And these trends were happening in our district and all across the board. And so the 30% that it came back to is what the norm would be. So that would be the norm. So the good news there is that we know that we've got a good access rate, like that hasn't decreased. And when we were all coming back, and that was more of an anxious time, people were accessing that service. So that's good news for us, because we know the service is there and our employees are accessing it. And it's sort of held. We haven't got our next quarter report, but it seems to be holding fairly steady on par. So the other indicator that we have, and of course this is really critical, is all of our what I call frontline managers, but that includes our principals, our vice principals, and all of our department leaders. And we hear very, very quickly through those leads about the general well-being of our staff. And it's, we have had hotspots. I'm going to give an example, but we've had some issues that have come to our attention, and I think I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, where we've actually gone on site and done some interventions. And we also know that as we were resuming, back into the stages and through the stages, we would go through different levels of people trying to readjust and get used to the new norm. However, we were getting regular reports, and sometimes they'll come through our emergency operating committee, and other times they may come from other ways, and we're able to respond to that. And I just want to tell a story that stuck in my mind. This goes back to the time, and I don't know, it was March or April, when we started to get back after spring break, and we were opening up our learning care centers. And that was really tough, because people had been working and hadn't been physically on a site for a few weeks. And then there were staff then that started to come back, and we knew the anxiety would be hard. And so, what we did in that case is we actually dedicated an entire day prior to those learning care centers opening to just having orientation. When the staff would come, they would be greeted by a team of experts, like our safety people, the principals. I think sometimes we had senior managers there. And this was the cool part. The staff did not have to stay for the whole day, but they felt so comfortable and so confident after that many of them volunteered to remain for the rest of the day. And I think for us, that was just such a good time. Like, it was such a good feeling that we were obviously on the right track in terms of instilling the confidence in the staff. And, we've learned from that around how important it is to make sure that there's good information sharing and site orientations, which continue now. So all of the employees who go to a new site, experience a specific COVID orientation. And then, so I went back in time and talked about an example, but a good example this week was one of our department heads at our emergency operating committee meeting brought up a particular group of employees who were starting to feel some anxiety. And then the emergency operating committee was able to weigh in with some suggestions, right, in terms of how we would help these employees and help that particular leader. So that's just the kind of thing that's going on all the time, but I wanted to tell those two stories as an example. So some of the other strategies that we have in place, and a lot of this we do all the time anyways, but you know, it's really important that we've got our administrative procedures. And so, for example, we have a number of safety procedures. We have our respectful workplace APs, and they are updated. We just updated some of these APs recently. We have annual reviews for many of them. And what's really important for this, the reason this is important is because I think it provides a structure and confidence in our staff that we are doing what we can do to make at every angle to make sure that there is a safe workplace for our staff. I touched the last time I presented on leadership development, and again, it's really critical that we want to make sure that we're always giving our leaders who manage the employees all of the tools and information. And one of the things that we focus on a lot, and this actually plays a big role in employees' well-being, is how our leaders have productive and constructive conversations with staff. We know from research that goes a long ways, right, in terms of addressing situations in a very, very timely manner. So many types of our leadership development will incorporate that, and I think that's important. We are working very hard to keep up with our recruitment, and the reason that is so important is because it's really, really critical for employees to know that they have a stable sort of workforce, and that they are that their workload, they have workload management. So that is, you know, that's one of the reasons, obviously, besides we need to make sure we've got sufficient staff to provide the proper levels of service, but that from I guess a well-being perspective, it's very important. And I can actually say, when I worked in a different province in a different organization, and we were in the middle of a workforce shortage, one of the learning for me was how that took a toll on the rest of the staff, because people were becoming overwhelmed with having to pick up tasks and do overtime and helping to sort of train people. So we understand that that's important. I think HR and all of our hiring managers have worked hard, particularly in the last few months, to keep on top of that. You will have seen all of the unbelievable communication, and if I just look even in this last week, the levels of communication, we have, they're coming out at every level of the organization. We have a very, I would say, progressive communication department, and that again is, I think, very, very much a necessary strategy at all times, and particularly now. And as I mentioned before, we are continuing to keep in touch with our union and our employee groups. We have senior management participating in those meetings, and hopefully we're having a great exchange and trying to collaborate and resolve situations together. And the last thing I just want to say is that, and it's kind of to do with the size of our organization, that's an advantage for us, because, you know, we're a fairly big organization, but we're not that big that we cannot have, there's access to HR staff, for example. So I would suggest that in our HR department, there's dozens of conversations a week that happen with individual employees. I've worked in organizations, you can't get through to a person because they're so big. And so I think, and particular now, I think we're able to diffuse situations or be able to help to address, sort of changes in process and things about leaves and all of this that employees may be wanting to talk to us about. So those are the things I wanted to touch on, and I'm now going to turn it over to Will Dirksen, who's going to actually elaborate on psychological health and safety.
Great, thanks, Patricia. And I just want to thank the board for having us here. As I know it's not the easiest time, but we're definitely have a staff that has the power to make the difference in education. And I just wanted to start off with, even today we had, in regards to psychological health and safety being on the forefront, I was at a district occupational health and safety meeting where, one of the key aspects of that meeting was developing key talking points for psychological health. And so, I mean, it's just something that we do, and it's an integral part of what we do in supporting the wellness with our staff. And that team actually has safety leadership from teachers and custodians and maintenance workers and principals, and it's just it's a very collaborative working group that we all know the health and safety of our workforce is paramount. So with this specific to occupational health and safety, and what we've done collaboratively with that stakeholder group is established a training component this year. And at our last safety committee training actually included an emphasis on psychological health and safety. And basically it was an all-day training session. We have over about 150 safety committee members. So we have safety committees at each of our work location, including all of our schools. And what we did at that training session was actually the first half of the day was devoted to psychological health and safety. And we had our mental health expert, Lynn Brown, in there, who focused on identifying personal psychological safety aspects. And she did a presentation for an hour with all of those safety leaders. And then we had our safety officer, Arlen Vlad, who did another hour on focused on psychological first aid in the workplace. And then we did, I did a presentation on how to identify coworkers that are in need of additional supports and how to access our employee family assistance program. And the intent of that was to infuse like a core cultural component, so those 160 local safety committee leaders at each site could work with their fellow colleagues, EAs, secretaries, teachers, custodians, bus drivers, maintenance workers, principals. They could the grassroots work with together with the team to help provide support and empathy for those dealing with difficult situations. So it's my thought that infuses, helps set the stage for success when we're dealing with difficult times, and much like we're going through right now. So that's one of the core components of what we did in the recent year. And also we have different tools to help with mental health. We have a website that has resources that helps with different aspects, along with mental health, nutrition, physical activity, coping skills, and it's accessible to all staff on our website. We also have a subcommittee on psychological health and safety within our Central Health and Safety Committee, and we're looking at next steps in the organization and working with Guardian Minds at Work to have a survey to evaluate how staff are doing. And in that regard, as far as evaluating, one of my limit tests is specific to this situation and in the now is when I go to work sites and I'm working through difficult situations and meet the people, you know, I'm always greeted with resiliency and positiveness, and I could tell stories about like where I was concerned it was go one way, and I was met with such resiliency and people and smiles and people in the community that want to work together and help the community work through this. So, and you know, I know storytelling is one of them, but I do have one where we had our child youth care workers getting ready to help with the food program, and I just finished doing a safety orientation with the people that collect all the food into bags, and I was going out to talk with and I didn't know, and there was like 20 child youth care workers out there greeting me, all 2 meters distancing with masks, and just the ray of support and positivity was truly felt. And you know, I felt the same thing. And this is kind of interesting, like our custodial staff that have been working overtime, like, and Arlen, our safety officer, and myself, we fit tested about 80 custodians, and it was a good chunk had full beards. And I'm like, oh, I hardly recognized them when they came in the door because you have to be clean shaven. But I mean, it's a dedication to the job, and I just you could feel it, right? There was no question they were shaving their beards. They're ready to do whatever it takes to get through this. So so I just wanted to share that, and you know, it's not easy times, and we're working through it, but we do have the tools out there to identify people and work with people and listen, and with empathy and respect. And it's just I just wanted to say, like, some of the core things, like taking your vitamin D as it's getting darker, like getting your fresh air and walks and exercise and eating balanced meals. Remember, your sleep is so important. You know, remember, it's important to watch the news, but make sure that's tempered with how much we watch, you know, so we're remembering our core breathing and looking after ourselves, right? And stay in team and look after each other. That's just how I wanted to wrap up. So thanks for having me here.
Well, thank you, Will, and I'll just say I see there's a trustee with a question there, and we'll get through a couple of questions. I think before that happens, though, I just want to thank both you and Ms. Trick for your presentation on this, and say that, you know, personally throughout all of this, I've actually you know, done some check-ins myself and utilized some of the supports that you talked about. And you know, I'm always the first to share that. One thing I find is that, you know, part of sort of removing the stigma around that is talking about it. And so it's good to see, you know, that you took the time to go through some of the specifics of what's happening, and that, you know, when we talk about being together and looking out for one another, you know, we're taking that a step further and now putting action to it, to not just identify for ourselves how we can self-care, but how we can, you know, your word, empathize and utilize resources and tips that are out there to help support those folks around us. So thank you. And well, it looks like we've just got one trustee question on the list. So I'll invite Trustee Stanley with a question.
Right, you know, as soon as psychological health and safety comes up, you know, I'm going to have a comment. So, you know what, thank you both so much. And I'm going to get into that a little bit more, but I want to acknowledge that the timing of your presentation, which I assumed was planned before we knew these, that the onset of COVID was going to hit us in our own schools. And so what a challenge it is for you to do this presentation. at the time where we're pretty much hitting it as far as high as stress can go. So that's not true. I don't want to, sorry, I did not mean to jinx us on that, but it is a high stress time. And it's also a little, you know, we need more information, and that would help us feel a lot better time. So just want to thank you for, you know, you're basically giving us really great information about how we have prepared ourselves for dealing with times of crises. And I know we're going to be learning a lot in this circumstance, but what is clear is that in this school district, and, you know, not to single out other school districts, but what is clear for me is that is how much people care, and how much you as, you know, our HR staff representatives really care. That has always come through to me. You've got some great big gigantic hearts, and I think that is so lovely. How much dedication we have from all of our staff has always, and now, I mean, wow, dedication is coming through loud and clear. So I just want to acknowledge all those aspects. Will, from the psychological perspective, I have to say I love your advice. I always said if I could do one thing as far as mental health goes, I would get people out walking or exercising, because it is highly effective. So I love your list. It's practical, it's helpful, it's bang on. And sometimes it's just those little reminders that we just need to go take a walk, you know, even if it's raining, but is really reassuring for me, because it's consistent with the science, and it's really beneficial, well, for all of us. So the fact that you identify that as kind of like just one of those core pieces of information that you communicate it's super effective, right? So thank you for that. I don't have, I mean, I kind of have a question, but I have a question. It's more of a request for future information, because I think you can't answer my question right now. And that, I guess, relates a little bit more to Ms. Trick's data about access to supports, you know, the kind of more official programs from which we would have data generated. Sounds like we don't have any, you know, we don't have, I'm assuming, we don't have anything current or somewhat recent, because it is current. And I think that that would be useful for us to have in the future, just to acknowledge, you know, how staff are doing during these more crises times, and if we can learn anything from that. So that's kind of what my question was, acknowledging that you can't answer it now, but I think it would be useful for us to hear later when we can have access to it. And just to say, like, just, you know, my heartfelt thanks as a human being, and my heartfelt thanks as someone in the mental health industry, both of those levels. I think you two are doing, you know, a shining example about how we can do the best we can, and I really, really appreciate it. So thank you.
Okay, and I think I might have found maybe a question in that, maybe not, but here's the question that's come up for me out of that, and again, not to be answered, but Ms. Trick, you did mention that you've looked at these stats quarterly, or I think it was quarterly, and, you know, with some surprising results. But we'll be expecting another sort of quarter, so maybe it would be ideal to sort of come back and have a look at that and how it compares, and just kind of do some. I personally would like to see some regular check-ins on this content, right, as we move through this together. So, not really a question, more of a comment. But unless you have something to add, Patricia. Sorry, Ms. Trick. No. Okay.
Yeah. No. Thank you.
Okay. Oh my goodness, I'm having Miss Wood. Sorry, Denise, your last name isn't showing up on the chat. I was having a freeze there. Okay.
Okay, I'll put it in.
And your question.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I have a question just related to the information that Ms. Trick was providing us. You were talking about monitoring workload and being cognizant of the fact that that we have to be really aware of that right now. And I just wanted to ask, because I'm very concerned, particularly about staff at Island Connect Ed. I have been in conversations with many of those teachers, and they are feeling really overwhelmed right now. There's been a large number of as we all know, students that have migrated over to distributed learning this year, and the staffing doesn't seem to be keeping up. And teachers are feeling like they are working harder than ever, that parents and students both are questioning them as to why things aren't getting marked on time, why why they aren't doing the job that they were doing last year. And teachers are feeling like they really are having to work double and triple time to get the work done. And so my question is, what are we doing about providing additional staffing to support those teachers? Because I am worried about their mental and physical health.
Through the chair, I'm going to ask if somebody from either the superintendent or the deputy superintendent wants to take a stab at answering that question. Thank you.
I did see Superintendent say, well, you've popped on my screen now. Would you like to address this question?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. Through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, great question. Thank you. It's one of the reasons that we've closed the doors to new registrations right now, because it was as soon as we had a few exposures in schools, the enrollment started to increase. So we've closed the doors for a little while so that we can figure out the staffing and hire some more staff members there. Thank you.
I muted myself. Ms. Wood, did you have a follow-up to that?
No, thank you. The staff there will be happy to hear that.
Okay, thank you. Out of habit, I muted myself and then I realized, well, there's no more questions to be asked. Any final comments from either the senior staff who reported on this, Ms. Trick, Mr. Dirksen?
Through the chair, I would just like to again say thank you, and thank you to both you and Trustee Stanley for your comments. And yes, we'll continue to go and navigate our way through this together.
Okay. I see Trustee Higginson giving a big shout out, big thank you for this work through this tough week. So. Okay, so we'll move on then to item 8.2. I'll invite Secretary Treasurer Mark Walsh to first talk with us about the recommendation on Franklin Street Gym. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Madam Chair and trustees. Mr. Sabo is also here. You might as well pop up, Mr. Sabo, because I'm sure there will be some questions, so thank you. So you'll see that a memo on page 8, 9, and 10 of the agenda with respect to Franklin Street Gym, providing a relatively fulsome background as to how we got to the recommendation that we've got to. I guess I would say that it's there for review. And obviously subject to questions. The high level of it really is that the gym, when it was damaged by fire, based off of the upgrades that are required and the amount that the insurer will pay, because there's upgrades to that facility that are going to go above and beyond what the insurer will pay. There'd be a significant cost that the board would have to take out of its own local, either operating or local capital funds, to bring that facility back to be able to open. And as important as our partners are, in reality, the board themselves don't use that facility a great deal. And so we have an opportunity right now. We have the CRC demolition has been approved. The Ministry of Education have been excellent partners in actually supporting us because the bids came in a little bit higher than our initial funding amount from the Ministry of Education. And they've been very supportive of that. We've got our bids back. And we are very confident that we can perform the demolition of Franklin Street Gym using insurance money and a small investment from the local capital of the board, and then inherently that'll bring the value of that land up. There's no specific plans. It's not part of what this report is for that particular piece of land, but given the significant cost to the board, our strong recommendation is that the board move to approve demolition in the circumstances based off of the report that you see. So subject to questions, the recommendation is there.
Thank you, Secretary Treasurer, and you did actually answer one of my questions in your introduction. I do appreciate these backgrounders, that's always helpful, and that was in relation to, you know, what does this mean for the land, and the value of the land actually increases as a result of this, but it's not to say that we have specific plans already for that land. So I do not see any questions coming up. What I will ask is if there is a trustee who would like to move the motion, or I can read the recommendation out, sorry. Oh, Trustee Higginson.
Sorry, you were so quick. I just wanted to make sure that all the necessary parties have, you know, been informed. There was some concern last month, or maybe it was the month before, they're all blurring together, about, you know, one of our very important partners in the use of that building, Tillicum Lalem, and some communications. So I'm wondering if this communication to them has been done and how they're feeling about it. I know it was in the report, but I just want to get a little bit more background on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Good question. I'll defer to Mr. Saywell's put his hand up.
Yeah, thanks. Through you, Madam Chair. Thanks for the question. Yes, we have been in contact with Grace Nielsen, the Executive Director of Tillicum Lalem Friendship Center, and we have updated her along the way. And in fact, I had an in-person meeting with Grace last week. So Tillicum Lalem, our long time partner, has been informed.
Trustee Higginson, did you have a follow-up?
No follow-up. Thank you.
Okay. Trustee Barron.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. Thanks for the information to our Secretary Treasurer. I appreciate the thorough information that you provided in the memo around the history and how we got to where we are today with this gym. I think it's really important to acknowledge the history there, in particular with the neutral zones long history in that building. And I appreciate Trustee Higginson's question around where we're at with that in those conversations and ongoing support for that important program in our community. My question is around breaking this down a little bit into, I'm noticing a couple things that stand out for me. Just because we're in a public meeting, I want to make sure that everybody's aware, and maybe you clarified in here somewhere, but I wasn't able to see it. Could you clarify two pieces? First of all, could you clarify the CRC Library Services Building, the actual location of that building first, and then I had another question that's interconnected around clarification as well.
Sure. So the CRC building was in our capital plan submission and approved, and that is on Selby Street. So when it's essentially on the same siting as the Franklin Street Gym, but it is a different building with significantly different demolition needs. But so it's on Selby. Franklin Street is on Franklin and Wesley. So, but this motion is not pertaining to CRC. That the CRC would be is proceeding. The funding is there. No concerns have been raised.
Okay, Trustee Barron, did you have a follow-up?
Yes, thank you, Chair. My other question was relating to the next part within the discussion section.
Sorry, Trustee Barron, is this a new question? Or I'm offering you a follow-up question. I see two other trustees have added themselves to the list here.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I had two clarification questions within the actual information that was being provided. So if you'd like to put me back on the list, then I can. It was just clarifications around the wording. Oh,
okay. I'll let you go ahead then.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you to the Secretary Treasurer. I was just wondering if you could clarify in the discussion section specifically. I do understand that you're wanting to have this motion passed in order to do both sites at the same time. But the language that I'm unfamiliar with, and perhaps others are as well, as it says that the two could be demolished virtually simultaneously, utilizing the vacant areas as laydown, parking, and deconstruction zones, which will minimize disruption to surrounding business operations. I was hoping that you could speak a little bit to that and clarify what you mean.
Sure. So through you, Madam Chair. So right on the corner of Selby and Franklin is an empty lot that we've been using as parking and renting through Robbins. And so what really is that lot is perfectly located for the contractor to be able to do both projects utilizing that space. And so there's no additional space required. So it just makes it a more efficient project for them to be able to work off of the empty lot, working on both buildings at the same time. Frankly, if they went with the CRC only, or if we went with the CRC only, they'd still be using that empty lot for that purpose. But it's just, as Mr. Sabo would say, synergistic to do it at both at the same time. Pete, do you have anything to add to that? Sorry, Mr. Sabo, do you have anything to add?
Thanks through the chair. We do have a parking agreement in place with Robbins Parking, and we've been in contact with them, and we're going to suspend that agreement to allow the contractor to have the entire site for all of the construction activities, plus some parking from the daycare at one point in the project for disruption of the tenant in the daycare off Selby that's owned by us. And that'll keep all construction activities off of city streets and minimize the impact on the neighborhood. Thank you.
Okay, I hope that clarifies, Trustee Barron.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, and Trustee Stanley.
Hi, thank you. In light of our, environmental stewardship board goal, and that at least one of these buildings was a heritage building. I understand. I can't say I'm well informed on the internal aspects of the building, but have we considered, or is it any part of the project that we're going to, I know we're not doing the work, but has the conversation been had about doing deconstruction to remove those resources that can be reused? I think there's some old buildings here that have massive timber beams, and I have one of them in my house. But like that idea that these materials are actually quite valuable, and that I believe that the cost differential when you deconstruct as part of the process is quite minimal. So I'm wondering if that's something that we were able to consider. I know it's somewhat new-ish concept, but I'm wondering if that was an aspect of this from the environmental stewardship perspective.
It was in two factors. One, and I see a principal on here, and they might be, I'm not sure, surprised, but if indeed Franklin Street is demolished, we would be moving the gym floor, which is still very functional, to Pleasant Valley. So that would be not part of the demolition project. We would do that work ourselves. With respect to the remainder of the building, we did have staff go in and didn't see a lot of optimistic opportunities for us to get usable things for us. Certainly the contractors, though, that is part of the work that they do, is salvaging as well. We intend, if it's approved, to go through one more time and see if there's perhaps any, to your point, Trustee, iconic beams of some sort, particularly perhaps that they could be used in the context of reconciliation. It's maybe one of our partners would have a use. We didn't identify anything of significance beyond the floor at this time, though.
Good question, and good response too. Trustee Keller.
Thank you very much. Question for staff through the chair. I'm wondering what discussions, if any, have been had with our community partners who use the building to be able to accommodate them in other facilities in our district.
Yes, sure. So the superintendent commented on the specific discussions about this project, but certainly I understand in the memo, I believe we mentioned that they've been accessing part of Woodlands for some of the programming that they have, and I know it's not quite as ideal as from a location perspective, but it is pretty close. So we have been working with them to find alternative space for the programs.
Thank you, and could you add me back to the list?
I think you can just keep talking.
Oh, wow. Aren't I lucky? Thank you, Chair. My second question is, if the demolition is approved and proceeds, do we have plans to be able to consider future programming for this site during our long-range facilities plan?
Through you, Madam Chair. So yes, certainly that would be, and I believe in our operational plan, which we've posted, there's a notation of the village at Selby. Perhaps the superintendent or Mr. Sabo can talk a little bit more about that. But certainly, I believe we've been looking at a potential use alongside Snuneymuxw for that for the land, but nothing is solid at this point. Perhaps the superintendent has additional perspective.
Mr. Sale, are you shaking your head?
Oh no, sure. Through you to Trustee Keller. Yeah, thanks for the question. Secretary Treasurer Walsh was quite correct. So we're working with a few partners that include the City of Nanaimo, BC Housing, Snuneymuxw, Tillicum Lalem, and Quamat Lalem, and really just initial conversations to explore what opportunities might exist down on that property in the way of not unlike our Tuxton property on 5th Street. The designs would be to imagine sort of a village down there, but very initial conversations and certainly nothing substantial for sure. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all, and I don't see any further questions. I'll just, I'm really excited to hear the concept of using that gym floor, though, I will say, in another school. And not only that, did I hear correctly that we'll be doing that work ourselves, district employees? Mr. Sabo?
Thank you. Yes, so we did have an opportunity to walk through the building, and it was the gym flooring that was identified as the most opportune item to recover, and it is a quality of floor that you cannot purchase. And so for the price of it being removed, it's less than what it would cost to purchase higher end floor, the highest end floor that doesn't match the quality. At this point, we haven't determined how the floor will be installed. We're still waiting to see if we're actually going to get the floor. And so if the demolition goes ahead, then we'll be making plans for the final removal and installation.
Okay,
Thank
I got
you.
enthusiastic there. Trustee Higginson, you have a comment?
Yeah, I'm going to be abstaining from the vote. Third party, like fourth party, sixth party, I don't know, arm's length removed, that my husband is involved. And so even though it's very, very, very arm's length, it just feels that for the perception of the possibility of conflict, I need to abstain from the vote. I've been given advice that it's not necessary because of the many layers that are between us, but it just feels like it's the right thing to do. So I just wanted to let my colleagues know I'll be abstaining from the vote.
Okay, thank you for informing us, Trustee Higginson. So on that note, I will read out the recommendation and hopefully have someone to second. The Business Committee recommends that the Board of Education School District number 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, approve the demolition of the Franklin Street Gym located at 421 Franklin Street, Nanaimo, BC. I see that Trustee Wilkinson has seconded the motion.
Point of order, Chair.
Oh, sorry. Yes, Chair. Oh boy.
The chair cannot make the motion, so Trustee Wilkinson could make the motion, and then you would.
See, it did feel odd that because I I thought I solicited that someone else do the motion earlier. That's great. Trustee Wilkinson, you put your hand up first a second. Do you want to present the motion?
Sure. I can present the recommendation that the Business Committee recommends that the Board of Education of School District number 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, approve the demolition of the Franklin Street Gym located at 421 Franklin Street, Nanaimo, BC.
Okay, and we need a seconder for the motion for the recommendation.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Trustee Brezovich. Okay, it's now open for any discussion. Seeing no discussion. Oh, I see Mr. Trustee Robinson.
I will support this motion with a great big crack in my heart. I've attended many very special events in that gym, and I'm certainly aware of how it has been used by Tillicum Lalem and the young people that they support. I have many, many fond memories, but I will support the motion.
Thank you, Trustee Robinson. Trustee McKay? Chair McKay?
Thank you. It is with definitely a heavy heart that I will support the motion this evening. The value of a building goes beyond its monetary value, and I think that this is a piece of history that is highly valued by members of our community, trustees, people who have grown up in Nanaimo, and most certainly Tillicum Lalem. And I look forward to having continued conversations with our partner groups. I have attended some of those conversations previously with the superintendent, with the partners that he's mentioned, and the possibilities are endless when all of us come together of what we can create in that space. And I'm sorry that it wasn't a revitalization of the gym for future use, but I believe that we can still find a good way to work together in that area of the land. And it's with a heavy heart that I'll support the motion this evening. So thank you for staff for all the work that you've done to put the background together on this.
Thank you, Chair McKay. Trustee Brezovich?
Thank you, Chair. I feel a little not sure I can follow that. That was quite eloquent, Chair McKay. I have roots with this building, and I will also support this motion. I actually have family who attended that building, near that building, and used it as students in our community years and years and years ago. I do realize it's a necessary thing. I hope that as we move forward and before we finish the tear down, that we make sure we have some kind of photos or something that will remind us of that building. And that's not a formal motion yet. I'll think about it and see if I can come up with something. Just as we commemorated Harewood School, I think that if we do come up with a new, if there's ever a new building, that we might want to remember this one too, because of what it's meant to the community. Yeah, when we have a new location. Yeah.
Thank you, Trustee Brezovich. I think, yes, I mean, there is a huge historic value and sentiment to this, and this decision doesn't bode lightly on any of us. But myself as well, I will be supporting this recommendation. And I don't see any further comments or discussion, so I'm going to call the question and ask that if you are opposed to this, please indicate so in the chat. Okay, I see no indication, therefore the motion is passed unanimously. Thank you. Oh,
through Madam Chair, just the minutes will reflect that Trustee Higginson did declare a conflict and didn't participate in the vote.
Thank you for that addition. And thank you, Secretary Treasurer Walsh and Mr. Sabo for being here to provide the background on this. Trustee Higginson, before we move on to the next.
Yeah, just on this, thank you. And I just, as I listened to my colleagues talking about the importance of the building and, have listened to our partners at Tillicum, talking about the history and the importance of the building to them. I'm just hoping that we can work with the community before the building is torn down to provide the opportunity to, have a proper goodbye to the building, and give people the opportunity that they may need to see the building off in a good way. So I just encourage that possibility. Thanks.
I really like that idea. Yes. Okay. So we're going to move on to agenda item 8.3, again over to Secretary Treasurer Mark Walsh to present on the Cole North Oyster traffic issues.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Sabo, you can stay on this one as well. Trustees, a number of trustees and members of the community have expressed some concerns about the traffic situation at Cole North Oyster, and it's an issue that's been going on for some time, particularly as the school has continued to grow. And so we thought that we would bring recommended a bit of a background and give trustees the opportunity to ask questions, as well as we have a number of recommendations for the board to consider with one motion for action by the board. And so Mr. Sabo will give a bit of a background on where we're at and how we've got here working with our partners in the current situation. But we're looking at three issues to proceed. And Mr. Sabo will talk a little bit more about one, and that's that the district staff and the school work together to coordinate advancing some of the recommendations out of the travel plan that you see attached here, and a draft of another plan was provided to trustees, which we will post on the website, but it's only a draft version, so we didn't put it in the package. But you will see on page 13 to 16 a number of potential options to support the issue that's there. I think, as noted, COVID has created additional issues as people have been less interested in getting on the bus and more interested in getting in the car to drive, which is good, and we're not discouraging that in this COVID year, which has made the problems has exacerbated the problems more so, as well as the limited availability of parents to be able to access the site. So again, I'll get back. Mr. Sabo can add to one in a moment. The second one is we are encouraging the board to try to proceed with one of the recommendations with respect to the crosswalk, and that would be to be requesting, and apologies here, it's not referencing the correct group. It's the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, not Ministry of Highways. So if it does get moved, it will just need to be corrected. And or the CVRD to support a crossing guard at the site. And the reason this recommendation is coming forward is that we're very cautious about expanding that particular service in the district. Generally, we're not, obviously we have a part to play as a district in traffic safety, but we are concerned about expanding the financial and operational footprint of providing crossing guards. We have 3 that came out of school closures. They haven't been reviewed in many years. And we're worried a little bit about inequity if we provide it at one school versus another. And, if we end up providing them at all schools, we're looking at multiple $100,000s of dollars. So clearly we're encouraging our partners to support this if the board decides to go that direction. And then finally, there's issues with that school that are going to require significant change to the physical site if we want to permanently solve the issue from a site perspective. So we either need to change the parking, to change the way that people get into that school. We need to make sure that the school, has proper space for the number of students that attend. But those are longer term issues that really don't require a response that is outside of COVID. And we would intend to come back to the board at a later time with a kind of permanent solution to be able to solve those issues. So that's a little bit of background. If I could ask Mr. Sabo to follow up a little bit more with the background of working together with our partners at the school level and the recommendations that they've come up with.
Thank you. Through the chair. I think I would go back in history as far as the consolidation of a Cole Davis Road with the Cole North Oyster, and increasing the population at the school, and recognition of the increased amount of traffic and the increased amount of students, and those crossing the streets, and the impact on student safety. And over the years, working with learning services facilities and learning services working together, and in 2019 conducting an active travel program at North Oyster. This came on the heels of some active transportation programs in the city of Nanaimo around closure activities with Rutherford and also Departure-Based School. And so it was deemed a high priority, and we carried out the active transportation plan. The draft report was concluded in the fall of 2019, and the intent is that the core committee services, facilities, transportation, and the school continue on reviewing the recommendations from time to time, ensuring that we're taking the most effective measures in reducing the traffic from all of our perspectives. And that group staff priorities have been affected somewhat to the recent activities, COVID, etc. In October, we did meet. So Laura Tate, myself, David Prevost, and John Cunyon, the current principal, and we went through the recommendations and basically reviewed 4 recommendations that that are part of the recommendations listed in the package, but they were specifically 4 that were pulled out that could assist with the traffic, reducing the risk to students by the traffic. And so one was formalize an agreement with the community center for parking. The other was, second was revisiting and evaluating the bus usage. A third was considering an AFG request for the feasibility of increasing parking on the site. And the fourth was continued education for parents and direction to parents through the school. So a number of different areas to attack. Out of the meeting on October 21st, the sense was from Laura Tate of the Learning Services that the most effective and immediate safety measure we could take would be to consider a crossing guard. And the group committed to meet again and follow up with these top 4 priorities and prioritize them so that we could have the most value for money in our efforts with that group. So I think I'll pause there and see if there's any questions or clarifications.
Thank you, Mr. Sabo and Secretary Treasurer Walsh. Trustee Keller has a comment question.
Thank you. So through the chair, I must admit that I am fairly new to this particular issue, so I appreciate the report from staff, and the background report really helped sort of frame the issue for me, so thank you for that. I guess a couple of comments and a question. In terms of the recommendation, I'm fairly comfortable working in regional district settings, of course, and working with the ministry and the various overlapping jurisdictions that you're dealing with in these rural situations. And one of the things that strikes me is just wanting to make sure that what we're doing has a good chance of success. And asking the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure to support our staff person or a position for us, I don't feel is going to be very productive. So I can agree with and I'll tell you why in a minute. I can agree with the idea of a crossing guard if it's recommended in the travel plan, which I understand it is. But I feel that if that's something that is warranted, that should be something the district pays for. And so just going back, from my perspective, I don't think we would be successful in getting the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure or the CRVD or any other local government for that matter to pay for a position for the school district. So I just have some concerns that we're asking for something that's unrealistic. And I would prefer that if we were to need that, to ensure the safety of students crossing the road, that we find a way to fund it, at least temporarily during COVID times, when we're being a little bit more flexible in how students are getting to school, and maybe not encouraging the busing quite so much at the moment, with the long-term goal of trying to get some funding to come up with a longer-term solution, and working with our ministry partner and this Cowichan Valley Regional District. I think there's some momentum that perhaps has happened since the travel plan came out, including the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure's active transportation guidebook. And now they're actually getting into acknowledging the idea that active transportation has a place within the public road right of way. So it's a very encouraging document that we could work with, for example, engineers and the ministry to try and make happen. So anyway, long story short, I appreciate the information. I would like to see, if warranted, a crossing guard, but I just don't see that the recommendation is going to get us there. Thank you.
So Trustee Keller, it sounds like you have a lot of knowledge in this area, but I do think I heard a question, and that is, what do you believe the success rate would be if, you know, making a request like this to the ministry? And if that wasn't your question, I'm inserting it as my question.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. That was my question.
So,
sorry.
Okay.
So through you, Madam Chair, I mean, I wouldn't want to speculate except for to say that I know a number in jurisdictions around the province, there are crossing guards funded by municipalities. There's some, I'm sure there's other ways they're funded, but certainly the experience in previous on the South Island, and there's a number of crossing guards that are funded by the municipalities as their responsibility for traffic safety. That may obviously not be the way that it works up here, but at the same time, I guess the concern stems, and I'm not suggesting that there's a huge chance of success, but of course, the worry, of course, is taking on the obligation of traffic safety as a school district, which would be inclusive of the crossing guard. And to be clear, we've done that 3 times before, and now that we've remembered this, we'll be coming with a report on that particular issue to the board as well.
Thank you. Mr. Keller, Trustee Keller, did you have a follow-up?
Real quick, yes, thank you. And I appreciate the response through the chair from Mr. Walsh. Just curious, in the examples that you can think of other local governments, are those all municipal governments, as in, say, a city versus a regional district setting? There's a key difference there in the sense that municipal governments typically have their own RCMP and would have a function related to that, whereas, you know, most regional districts probably don't.
Through Madam Chair, so yes, it is the municipal governments, and certainly I guess I would also say, sorry, we would see that an unlikely success with respect to the CVRD, because I believe transportation is under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. So, but yes, it's the other examples are municipal.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Trustee Stanley?
Hi, I know I have a follow-up, so I'll just let you know, because my first question really is making sure that I know what I'm talking about for my other question. And that is in our agenda, we were included on page 13, and and then it continues, a number of what are called, well, it's called the school travel draft final action. And these appear to be the same thing as the taken out from the report, what I think is a consultant that was written in November 2019. So I want to check, well, okay, I have a number of questions. So first up, I want to ask if these are just those taken out from that report. And one of the things I want to clarify in that is that in the very top recommendation, GA number 1, it talks about completing a school travel program, and that program is the responsibility of the school district. So I don't know if that recommendation or challenge, as it's identified, about creating a program is different than these draft final action items in the agenda, and whether these are, they seem similar, but I haven't been able to check every single one, whether these are exactly the same things that were in the consultant's report. So kind of three related questions. I just want to make sure that these, you know, what information we're looking at here.
Okay, I think Mr. Sabo has indicated he'll answer that.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I believe number one, in the intent of the consultants, is that to complete the school travel plan essentially is removing draft from the document. And so in other words, that makes it a final travel plan. And I don't believe, you know, in working with learning services and looking at these active travel plans, adopting a process by which the district formally agrees with them and receives them and signing off on a draft and moving ahead with recommendations is something that we're looking at, and we don't actually have a formal process or a guide for that. So I think that's what they meant, was take the draft off and start and then begin the implementation of the recommendations. And you know, that's I think that's, I would stop there. Yeah.
Okay, so then the
question.
Well, I just want to clarify, I understand that, because my question will get there. So just one second. So you're saying that the recommendations by the consultants are going to be accepted. We're going to get rid of the word draft, and that will be the program?
Through the chair, this is a very interesting business, because the recommendations arrived at are done so by a committee that's formed with the best intent of the outcomes of the recommendations. And it'd be very difficult to state that every recommendation would be accepted and carried out, because some of the recommendations, some recommendations carried out further would make other ones moot, or not necessarily items that would be the highest priority to act on. And so I think when these recommendations come forward, suggesting, for instance, that we consider an AFG program for the parking, we would do that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we would expand the parking. And so the recommendations are crafted to the best of the group's ability to fit within the district structures and how staff carries out business, etc. So taking the draft off, I think, would be the intent then that we would work with all of the recommendations to start to construct an implementable program.
Okay. Okay, so then my question.
Trustee Stanley, okay, good, Trustee Stanley. I just want to clarify earlier, I was just trying to clarify if you were clarifying, done with the clarifying and moving on to the question, but now you have the clarification and you're going to ask the question, right?
Right. Yeah,
okay,
because my question was about the program, and I'm trying to understand what the program is, but it sounds like we don't have a program yet, but I'm just going to put my question out there because you may still be able to answer it. And that is because of the, from what I understand, the construction has begun on the Yellow Point bike path in along Cedar from a road named Cole to Haslam, meaning it goes right past the school. I think it's, I'm not sure of the first street name. Anyways, what I was going to ask is how that affects the program, but we don't have a program. So I don't know if you can answer how that, the fact that that bike path is now going in that part will impact upon how a program. Does that make sense?
Yes, through the chair. I don't think I want to overly complicate it. Maybe I have. The program is the document that was emailed out to trustees, which is the active travel program with the recommendations. It just simply had draft on it, and that's our program. And so when the draft is taken off, that's the program we would follow with the recommendations. And then we'd continue to work, staff would continue to work to implement the recommendations that appeared to be assisting with the issues that we were facing. I was made aware that the bike path is being constructed. Thank you for clarifying. I hadn't had a chance to look at the exact route And so pleased to hear that it's going by the school. And if in fact it is going by the school, then yes, that would substantively affect the program and the safe walk for the students. And that would be something that as a group we'd have to look at and see it, does that change our priorities? And if so, how, with respect to the recommendations?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Stanley, I'm going to move on to other speakers unless you have a burning follow-up there.
Nope.
You're good? Okay. Trustee Higginson, please.
Thank you. So I just heard, let's not overly complicate things. So here's what I'm going to propose a motion so that we don't overly complicate things. So if I get a seconder, I'll explain it. That the business committee recommends that staff prepare a report for the December business committee on the cost of a temporary crossing guard for École North Oyster to support student safety during pickup and drop off. Okay, we've got a seconder. So is it okay if I speak to it now?
Yes, you can motivate.
Thank you. I put this motion forward because I don't want us to make decisions without having all the information. And I'd like us to have some time to think about this. But the recommendation from staff, acknowledges a problem but doesn't solve it. And I'm really concerned about the safety there. And so COVID has exacerbated the safety of what's happening in front of École North Oyster. A child has already been hit by a car there at a school event. I do believe that I heard our director of facilities just say, it came out of one of the, I don't know, we're talking about like programs and committees. I've lost track. Say that one of the recommendations was a crossing guard. So we're seeking funding for it. So what I think we need to do is get that crossing guard and then seek the funding for it if that's what's possible. And so, I'm cautious with my words there where I said temporary. And I would just like us to know the cost of it and have a discussion about solving the immediate problem without getting ourselves all bogged down into the report. And all of the report is very comprehensive. And I think what we've heard tonight from staff is there's sort of short-term, medium-term, and long-term problems. And so let's solve the short-term problem and then make the rest of the part of the issues part of our long-term facilities plan. So that is my request, that we get a costing for this for December so that we can make an informed decision. I'm not sure the rest of it is really, like, it's even funny that the board has to talk about whether we should have a crossing guard. It feels like way like we're in the weeds, but it's here. So let's figure out the cost and see what we feel like, how we feel. Thank you.
Okay. Pete, Mr. Sabo, I see your hands up, and I'm just, I do have another trustee on the list. We are in a motion right now, but I'll entertain if you've got some information.
Yes, just a point of clarification on the report. It's been mentioned a number of times that a crossing guard's a recommendation arising out of the report. Actually, the consideration for a crossing guard was part of the report. The actual recommendation came from Laura Tate after a meeting at the school. So just, not to complicate it, but just to clarify. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Barron, to speak to the motion.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, big thank you to Trustee Higginson for bringing forward this motion. I would support us bringing forward this motion and have more that I would like to say around this, but I can wait till we get more information at the December business meeting. If this motion does pass, I do think that it would be good for us to look more at the costs associated with this. And perhaps just one piece of information that I had thought of prior to Trustee Higginson bringing this forward that relates to this is that I don't think we necessarily, I think the motion for the information can be specific to what it would cost to have a crossing guard for only École North Oyster, recognizing that in order to provide equitable safety within our district, we don't need to provide crossing guards at all schools because of the uniqueness of each school. So I would be happy with just knowing specifics of École North Oyster and then taking it from there. So just to clarify, I don't think we need to jump to understanding what this would look like at the district level to provide crossing guards across the district as a result of looking at one school. So just a thought that I had around that, and thanks for bringing it forward, and I would support this motion.
Okay. Trustee Stanley?
So with regards to the questions with regards to the motion, that I'm wondering, is it possible? So one of my children is at Cordaway, and they have students that monitor the crosswalk on the road. I'm wondering what are, do we have policy? Do we have practice? How do we feel about what have been called student safety councils that monitor crosswalks? Besides, are there alternatives that we have considered in addition to or besides paying for a staff member? I'm just wondering, I support Trustee Higginson's motion. I'm wondering if we can, in that conversation, broaden it for other considerations that would address or increase safety at the crosswalk that may or may not involve a staff member. I just don't know. What other options are reasonable at this location?
I'm going to take a bit of a stab at that because we are in a motion, and I think it ties into some of the questions and comments that I have. I would, in this particular motion, I see this as asking for more information essentially on this, specifically one thing coming out of this recommendation, which is a crossing guard, right? But there are other things in the recommendation that's been presented in the agenda. So for myself, what I'm struggling with here is because I'm also hearing that there's very real safety concerns, and there is a sense of urgency in dealing with that. So I think I understand the intent of this motion to do something in the immediate and look at where we get the monies for it in the later part. So for those reasons, I'm happy to support the motion that's before us. But I also, and I don't want to overcomplicate things and add an amendment, but to say that I think that another aspect is, why wouldn't we still put forward a recommendation that also asks for the CVRD and the ministry to support this position? Why lose that time from now until we get that information in December? So I'm just putting that out there. And I know that doesn't really, I wasn't attempting to answer Trustee Stanley's questions, but just to say, I think I have some similar questions. And what it all boils down to for me is that if a motion like this is passed, we're essentially directing leadership to go back and do the work and come back with some more information and rationale and the real costs of this. And then if we're going to talk about other schools, from my perspective, I think that's a bit sort of out of context at this point, because we are very clearly, in my mind at least, looking at the situation at École North Oyster. So that's what I'll say on that.
Can I offer a point of clarification? Because I wasn't talking about any other schools. I just wanted to say about this location. Yeah. Because I'm considering proposing an amendment that we add a report on other crossing guard options. I just want to be able to find out if we can get some more information about the options about crossing guard, variety of way that we can do that out of that sense of urgency for this location.
Well, and Trustee Stanley, just if I may clarify, I wasn't meaning that, I know you mentioned a school as an example, but there's been another couple mentions of different schools included in the report itself. I don't know what other information can be provided. I'll, divert this to the staff if they want to look into that, or if we want to consider a friendly amendment to this to expand the intention. I see.
Point of order, Chair.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we're digressing too far away from the motion, so either there needs to be an amendment made or we accept the fact that staff will include non-cost options included in their report in December, which I think would solve the problem.
Thank you. Okay, any further comment, follow-up from any other trustees? Amendments? No? Okay. So I'll call the question then on the motion that's before us. Please indicate if you are opposed to the motion in the chat window. I see no opposition, so this motion has been passed unanimously. Okay. So just to say, so I don't know that we want to leave this topic entirely. But I will ask that trustees provide some guidance here if there's anything further on this agenda item, or we'll simply, I think, refer is the term, this back to the business agenda with the other new information that's presented through the other motion. Secretary Treasurer, I'm looking at you. You can.
Yeah,
you're nodding.
You, Madam Chair. So what we'll do is we'll add this. What's in the agenda now is an appendices to the report that's there, and then of course the board will make a motion based off the information that it's got. But we won't. We'll be providing information only and not a recommendation. That would be the frame of what we'd be providing.
Okay. Thank you. And I just trying to see here, Trustee Stanley and Higgison, that was prior. Trustee Stanley, did you have a new question? Or was that from prior? Sorry, oh, you're on mute, I can't hear you. That's okay. I think you're saying you're good.
No, I'm saying I believe I need to give way to the point of clarification before my question.
Okay, the point of clarification is coming from Trustee Barron.
Thank you, Chair. A point of clarification, and now I'm wondering if it is in the actual right order. I was just wondering before we moved on, I noticed that there was a motion in our agenda specifically to the letter being written, and I'm wondering if we needed to bring that motion forward and have a vote on that. If we've clarified this, I didn't understand, so perhaps somebody could clarify for me, please.
Okay. Super Secretary Treasurer, do you want to?
Thank you, Super Chair. So no, indeed. So the motion is only a recommendation from staff. It hasn't been moved nor seconded by a member of the board, so it's not live before the board for debate. So if someone wanted to move it, they could. Alternatively, it can, if someone wanted to move it along with whatever the next stage was in December, that would also be an option.
Thank you.
Thank you. I did hear that, but you needed to put those pieces a little bit clearer for me. Thank you very much.
Okay, so Chair McKay. Boy, my chat line's just lighting up here. Okay.
Thank you. I'd like to move that the Business Committee recommends that the Board of Education of School District Number 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, write to the Cowichan Valley Regional District and the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure requesting that they fund a crossing guard at a Cole North Oyster at pickup and drop-off times to support student safety, and I'm happy to motivate if there's a second.
There is a second, so go ahead and motivate.
Thank you. I think I look forward to the report that
Trustee Wilkinson seconded. I should clarify who.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I look forward to the report that comes back from staff in December so that the board is able to action something potentially. But I do, however, think that we still need to begin the process of making this recommendation to the board at the end of the month to seek to start that conversation on the possibility of funding. If there is an opportunity for us to find funding and to share perhaps costing with other organizations, municipalities, ministries, I'm all for that. My experience with working through oh geez, multiple different schools who have looked at active transportation plans and gone through that process. Departure Bay, Frank J. Ney, even back to Cedar Elementary at a time where we were looking to have some board support in supporting different changes to transportation infrastructure. It's a difficult task, and I think that the board has a role to play there. And if we can advocate for that and potentially even see some support in funding, then I think we start that conversation now and see where our information takes us in December. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Trustee Robinson and then Trustee Brzovic.
I would definitely support that motion. I was about to say the very same thing.
Thank you, Trustee Robinson. Trustee Brzovic.
Thank you, Chair. Initially, as in during the week as I was reading preparing for the meeting, I was not going to support this recommendation because I had the same concerns as Trustee Keller based on some of my own experience in dealing with government. However, given that we have come up with we're also exploring a second alternative, and I don't necessarily see the harm in at least reaching out to government and seeing if we can get support. I'm uncertain that we will get that support, but as long as we're also exploring second alternatives to, in case as a fallback plan B, I can support this.
Thank you, Trustee Brzovic. Trustee, and I didn't cut you off there, did I, or did you freeze?
No, that really was all I was trying to say is my skepticism initially was the lack of a plan B, and you know.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Keller.
Thank you. So I am not going to be speaking in favor of the motion, and the reason for that is because I feel that it's a misplaced motion. I don't believe that, I believe, I'll put it in a positive perspective, I believe we should be reserving our ask for a time when we have a concrete improvement within the road right of way that we can go to ask for funding for, versus a piece of, like a piece of infrastructure or capital versus asking them for funding operations. So I don't believe that we would be successful, and my preference would be that we reserve our ask for something that is more tangible.
Thank you for your comments, Trustee Keller. Trustee Barron.
Yes, thank you. A lot to wrap my head around, to be honest, with so many pieces that I'm far from an expert on, but I did have some initial reactions that were very much in line with Trustee Keller, and that stems from many questions that I have, which is generally the case. I do have some concerns about this motion, as I do agree that we should be very purposeful with our asks. And I wonder, you know, of the potential success of this ask, and if there are other asks that we could be putting into a letter that would have a better potential outcome. And so I do hesitate to support this motion, as I do think that there are other opportunities that we may miss out on as a result of putting forward this letter. And so I think based on the information that has been presented, although I do agree, you know, it is great for us to collaborate and partner and seek funding as much as possible to avoid additional cost to our district. I just don't think that this is the way to go, and I will not be supporting this motion this evening.
I'm trying to
I'm
trying to type adding myself here on the list, but I can see there is no one else on the list. Just to say that I'm going to support this motion myself. That was some of the intention of my comments earlier. I quite frankly don't see why we wouldn't ask the question, and especially given the fact that there appears to be some information where there are other municipalities and government supports available for exactly this type of traffic control and safety on our highway system. Trustee Wilkinson.
Thank you. So I will be supporting the motion tonight. When I was the trustee for Call Northwester, I was part of that safety audit that we did. We went out there with, the group of people who were involved and watched the cars go by. The issue is that there's turns quite close on either side with 60-kilometer driving. There's big trucks. There's not enough parking on the side of the road. There's no sidewalks, and students need to cross from the parking lot across the street. And so honestly, anything that we can do to try and move this forward, I'm in support of. So if we can try this and see what will happen, then I'm in support of that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Trustee Wilkinson. Trustee Brezovich, you have a question? Or are you calling the question?
No, I'm asking a question. And I don't know if there's an answer to this. I'm wondering, I guess, if there's a way, and if this would require a different motion, to, in the request, when we send out the request letter, that we could say something that would open the door for further discussions about other options. If they point blank say, well, no, we don't do that, we won't do that, but we could maybe do this. Like, how do we, is there, my concern is writing the letter in a way that it keeps open, it doesn't shut the door to conversation around other ways to collaborate, if the answer is a no.
Secretary Treasurer Walsh, I see you've made yourself available.
Through you, Madam Chair. That's already in progress. We're in regular communication with those groups. Mr. Sabo and Mr. Prevost, I think very recently have met with them, or just not met, but spoke with them. So we'll be, even without success, staff will continue to be working with them to try to make improvements. And I'm sure they'll have some input on what the long-term solution is going to look like, because this is just focused on the short-term issue.
Thank you.
Okay, Trustee Barron.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, there's some delays in my button pushing this evening. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to speak a second time because I didn't feel like I was 100% clear in the last time I spoke, so thank you. I just wanted to clarify that I 100% agree that there are safety issues surrounding the school. I was a previous staff member at the school in my previous life, and I know that there is a need. The reason why I would not support this motion is not because I don't want to move forward with the important work that needs to happen to increase safety, but I think that the best route in my mind is to look at the information that's provided back to us to implement a short-term solution through the district, and then stepping back and saying what is the most important thing that we can ask through a letter to the partners that would get us more, a better outcome than just asking for them to pay for a role for a crossing guard. It's a vital piece, but I do think that I would like to look at what we're asking and how and what pieces we can take on. I just think it's just around the distribution of how this would look in order to have everything covered. And so, yeah, I 100% agree that we need to be looking at crossing guards and funding for crossing guards. I just don't think that this is the avenue to go in order to get that up and running. Thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Barron. Okay, I see no further comments or questions here. I'm going to ask trustees to indicate I've been doing this all night, so I won't change it now. If you're opposed to this motion, please add that in the chat. Okay. So I have noted here that there are 4 opposed to the motion. Trustee Keller, Trustee Barron, Trustee Higginson, and Trustee Stanley. With that, the motion is the motion is carried. And sorry, I hope I'm reading this right. Trustee Stanley, you have a question after the motion. For a second, I thought I might have counted you in. Okay, so that's the motion does carry, and the record will show the rest of the trustees were in support of the motion, and the motion carried. Trustee Stanley.
Thank you. Just wanted to follow up on my previous, probably last time I spoke, but I'm just not clear, and so I just want to check in with staff because I don't know, I wanted to see if they were willing to provide us that information about alternatives, about the crossing guard support without a motion. So it was suggested that we could ask staff for a report without a motion. I just want to make sure that they're comfortable with that, or if I needed to put forward a motion.
We will have alternatives prepared. That's quite easy.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I see no further comments or questions. I'm going to now move on to one of the final items on the agenda around budget year calendar 8.4, Secretary Treasurer Walsh, and this can be found on page 17 through 20 of your agenda packages. Secretary Treasurer Walsh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So you'll see a budget calendar, and it's a little bit different than I believe in previous years. So what we wanted to try to do is give the board and the community kind of a look at what a full year would look like. So I'll go briefly through it, and I've included some of the internal discussions as well, so people are aware when those internal discussions are happening. So again, you'll see in October, we bring our Q1 report, and this year we had a stakeholder budget literacy session. So what we did was we brought together, essentially walked through what this process looks like, how the budget's made, the inputs to the budget, how theoretically changes could get produced. I believe it was recorded, and I think we've tracked down the recording so that anyone's interested in seeing that presentation would have available to them. We've also, of course, indicated to trustees, the community as well, if they want us to come and speak about any other specific issues, we're happy to do that. The finance team is happy to come and make sure that people understand how the processes work. I haven't any specific requests yet, but I anticipate we'll probably have another one at some point and make sure that trustees are invited. You'll see in November, we talk about budget review sessions. So the finance team, and particularly Ms. Sutton, has done an excellent job in creating some tools. So all of our directors that are essentially in charge of budgets are aware of what the budget looks like, what we anticipate next year's budget would look like, how things could get changed if they needed, and the timeline, what that would look like. We've talked about an additional budget literacy session this month, but again, the demand's not quite there. So if it comes, we will. So stemming from this week's sessions with the various departments, just to say, look, here's your budget, generally what it looks like. We're kind of building from a place of status quo and indicating that, you know, any significant changes, you need to contemplate coming to the board to talk about, not at budget time in April, but let's start talking about, you know, if it's a change that's coming, the board needs to know the gap. So for instance, if we have extra funds available, the board wouldn't be surprised in April if we said to the board, oh, here's where we recommend some additional expenditures, or alternatively, if we needed to make some changes within a department, why those changes would be coming. We wouldn't want to come in April. and to surprise the board with changes. We think that it's important that we would come in December, January, February, talk about where our challenges are, where opportunities lie. So again, the December 18th, that's the big date. And right this year, we're in very uncertain times because of COVID. Because we hear things are going to get tighter in future years, perhaps. We don't know how many kids we're getting back. We don't know if the move to DL, is going to be permanent for a lot of students. So we could have some significant we'll start getting a sense there, but also December is important because the ministry is going to say, yes, we accept your CEF amounts. Yes, we're the funding as you've presented from the various funding envelopes at the end of September, et cetera, are going to be supported. And so we'll get a sense there too, if we already can get an idea if we have some extra funds in the current budget year, not the following budget year. The new year starts with enrollment projections, and of course, giving our principals the opportunity to say, hey, we think you're too conservative here. We see, 22 buildings with nothing but kids populating them that our projections are not seen, so they have a little bit of influence there. Note, and I want to continue to note, that when the budget projections come to you for the budget season, they are going to be based on conservative numbers, as they always are, because undershooting is far better than overshooting, and we can see that this year. If it wasn't for the federal funds, we'd have an enormous gap in our services, because of course our bricks and mortar schools have very small class sizes and much lower numbers of students than we were projecting. So then you see just the January process, when enrollment information becomes available, preliminary budgets, when these various meetings, et cetera, et cetera. And so the other big date is March 12th. So in a normal year, we have a good sense of what the ministry would be funding us, and maybe there's not going to be big changes this year, but the the March 12th announcement is where there could end up having to be shifts. Of course, we'd come back to the board very quickly. So for instance, if the ministry determined that they were going to cut the amount per pupil, which I'm not suggesting for a second that's being contemplated, just want to be clear, that's when we would hear that, and then that we would have to make some quick shifts there. Alternatively, if there was extra dollars available that we weren't anticipating and they get announced on March 12th, then we might have to go back and make some changes. And so just wanted to give the calendar there. And so, if there's ever any interest to say, well, Secretary Treasurer, you mentioned that enrollment, you're starting to look at enrollment in January. Can you give us an update, and we can probably give you an informal update at that point. But so just wanted to highlight the goal of the finance team is to be known as the most transparent finance team in the province right now. So please always be seeking information if you're looking for it. But that's the calendar as it stands.
Thank you for that, Secretary Treasurer. And my only comment would be, if we don't use up that additional budget literacy session, that maybe we plunk it somewhere else, a little sort of midway through. Personally, it's always helpful to sort of get a little bit more fiduciary up on my lingo when it comes to budgetary talk, and especially when we move into those pieces like in March, where it just is even a refresher for some. I don't see any comments or questions, so thank you for that presentation. And we don't have any further correspondence or unfinished business, new business, and question period. No questions I'm seeing. I see a motion to adjourn from Trustee McKay. Oh, I see Mr. Saywell pop up. Is that to say goodbye? Nope. See a second of adjournment. So we will motion to adjourn. No opposition. Everybody have a good night. Thank you.